My family called me a disgrace at my brother's promotion party. But 30 minutes later, his CEO walked in and everything changed. I'm Marcus Thompson, and if you'd asked anyone in my family 5 years ago, they'd tell you I was the disappointment, the screw-up. The kid who threw away a perfectly good future for some pipe dream. Tonight, sitting in the corner of this fancy restaurant, watching my older brother David bask in the glory of his promotion to Executive Vice President at Heritage Corporation, I couldn't help but think about how we got here. The memory hit me like a slap in the face, graduation day 8 years ago. I was 22, standing in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Mum and Dad had promised they'd be there. "We wouldn't miss it for the world, honey," Mum had said, squeezing my hand. But as I walked across that stage to receive my business degree, the 2 seats I'd saved in the front row remained empty, cold and empty, just like the pit in my stomach. Later that evening, I found out where they were. David had called with urgent news about a potential promotion at his entry-level job. Suddenly, my college graduation, 4 years of work, loans we'd struggled to pay off, became secondary to my brother's maybe promotion. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom had said when I confronted them, barely looking up from the celebration cake she'd bought for David. But David's career is at such a crucial point right now. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to chase the family business path Dad had mapped out for me. I wasn't going to spend my life competing for scraps of attention with my perfect older brother. I was going to build something of my own. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," Dad had thundered when I told him I was starting my own company instead of joining his accounting firm. "You think you're smarter than everyone else? You think you don't need family?" The answer, apparently, was yes. Because 3 months later, when my startup idea started gaining traction, I asked them for a small loan to expand. Just $5,000. Dad had literally laughed in my face. "Marcus, son, when are you going to grow up and stop playing games?" He'd shaken his head like I was a child asking for candy. "David just got promoted again. Why don't you ask him for some career advice instead of chasing fantasies?" That was the last time I asked my family for anything. The waiter's voice snapped me back to the present. "Can I get you another drink, sir?" I looked down at my barely touched whiskey. Around me, the celebration was in full swing. David stood at the centre of it all, his arm around our parents, regaling his Heritage Corporation colleagues with stories about his rise through the ranks. "Marcus still thinks he can make it as an entrepreneur," I heard him telling his boss earlier. "Been at it for 5 years now. We keep hoping he'll come to his senses." 5 years. It had been exactly 5 years since I'd walked out of the family home with nothing but a suitcase and a laptop. 5 years since Dad had looked me in the eye and said, "Don't come crawling back when this fantasy falls apart." The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat here in this upscale restaurant surrounded by Heritage Corporation executives, listening to my family celebrate David's success at a company I knew better than anyone in this room. Mum approached my table, her smile strained. She'd been trying all evening to include me in conversations, but it felt forced, obligatory. "Marcus, honey, why don't you come join us? David's boss is here, and it might be good for you to network a little." She paused, lowering her voice. "You know, in case your current situation doesn't work out, current situation, as if my life was some temporary phase I'd eventually outgrow. "I'm fine here, Mum." I raised my glass slightly, just enjoying watching David's big moment. She sighed, that familiar disappointed sound I'd been hearing my whole life. "You know we love you, right? We just want what's best for you. What's best for me." According to them, what was best for me was giving up, admitting defeat, and falling in line behind my successful brother. What was best for me was accepting that I'd always be the family disappointment. "I know, Mum." I kept my voice gentle. There was no point in fighting tonight. This was David's moment, and despite everything, I didn't want to ruin it for him. As she walked away, I caught David's eye across the room. He raised his champagne glass in my direction. Whether it was meant as a peace offering or a subtle reminder of who the successful brother was, I couldn't tell. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, my lawyer, and one of the few people who knew the whole story. "Ready for tonight? The paperwork is all finalised. Just say the word." I stared at the message for a long moment. For 5 years, I'd been building towards this moment. 5 years of 18-hour days, of eating ramen noodles while pouring every dollar back into the business. 5 years of my family thinking I was a failure while I quietly acquired the pieces of something much bigger than they could imagine. Another text came through. "Boss, Mr. Harrison's ETA is 8 p.m. Should we proceed as planned?" Mr. Harrison, William Harrison, CEO of Heritage Corporation, the man my brother had been trying to impress for the past 3 years. The man who had no idea that David's disgrace of a little brother had been the anonymous investor slowly buying up shares of his company. I looked around the room one more time. At my parents, beaming with pride as they introduced David to anyone who would listen. At David himself, confident and commanding, completely comfortable in his role as the family success story. At the Heritage Corporation executives toasting their rising star. None of them knew that in 30 minutes everything was about to change. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Marcus Thompson speaking." "Mr. Thompson, this is James from Heritage Corporation. Mr. Harrison has arrived early. He's asking if now would be a good time." I glanced at my watch. 7:30 p.m. David was in the middle of a speech about dedication and family values. The irony was perfect. "Tell Mr. Harrison I'll be ready for him." "Should we make the announcement now, sir?" I looked at my family one last time. At the parents who'd missed my graduation, but never missed one of David's achievements. At the brother who'd gotten every opportunity handed to him while I'd fought for scraps. At the people who'd written me off as a failure before I'd even had a chance to prove myself. "Yes," I said quietly. "It's time." As I hung up, Dad was raising his glass for a toast. "To my son David," he announced loudly, "who proves that hard work and family values always pay off, unlike some people who think they can take shortcuts in life." He didn't look at me directly, but everyone in the room knew who he meant. A few people glanced my way with sympathetic looks, probably thinking about the black sheep brother who couldn't get his life together. If only they knew. The restaurant door opened, and I saw him. William Harrison, CEO of Heritage Corporation, tall and distinguished in his perfectly tailored suit. His eyes swept the room once before landing on me. He nodded slightly. Dad was still in the middle of his toast. David understands that success comes from loyalty, from commitment to proven paths, not from chasing impossible dreams. "Excuse me," a voice interrupted from the back of the room. All heads turned toward the entrance. William Harrison stepped forward and the room fell silent. Even Dad stopped mid-sentence. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Harrison said, his voice carrying easily across the restaurant. "But I believe someone here has been expecting me." David immediately stepped forward, straightening his tie. "Mr. Harrison, sir, what an honour. I'm David Thompson, your new Executive Vice President." Harrison smiled politely, but didn't move toward David. Instead, his eyes found mine across the room. "Actually, I'm here to see someone else." The confusion in the room was palpable. Mum and Dad exchanged glances. David's confident smile wavered slightly. Harrison walked past the crowd of Heritage Corporation employees, past my parents, past David, and stopped directly in front of my table. He extended his hand to me. "Well," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "if it isn't the owner of the Heritage." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every eye in the room on me as I stood up and shook Harrison's hand. "Mr. Harrison," I said calmly, "right on time." David's face had gone completely white. What do you mean, owner?" Harrison turned to address the room, still shaking my hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Marcus Thompson, majority shareholder and owner of Heritage Corporation." The sound of Mom's champagne glass hitting the floor seemed to echo in the stunned silence. "Marcus," Harrison continued, "has been our anonymous investor for the past 18 months. As of yesterday's board meeting, he now owns 60% of the company." I watched the information sink in. Dad's mouth was hanging open. Mum looked like she might faint. David was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "That's impossible," David stammered. "Marcus he's been unemployed for 5 years." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Unemployed?" Mr. Thompson sold his tech startup to Microsoft for $47 million 2 years ago. He's been one of our most strategic investors. The room erupted in whispers. I could hear fragments of conversations. 47 million, he owns Heritage. The brother owns the company. Dad found his voice first. "Marcus, son, why didn't you tell us?" I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd called my dreams fantasies, who'd refused to loan me $5,000, who'd written me out of the family business because I wasn't serious enough. "I did tell you," I said quietly. 5 years ago. I told you I was going to build something. You told me to stop playing games." "But we had no idea you were successful," Mom said, her voice shaking. "You never said anything about Microsoft or investments you never asked." The words came out harder than I'd intended, but they were true. For 5 years, every time we spoke, you asked when I was going to give up and get a real job. You never once asked how the business was actually doing. David was still staring at me in shock. You own my company?" "I own the company where you work," I corrected. "And, as of tonight, worked." Harrison cleared his throat. "David, we'll need to discuss your position. There are some performance issues that need to be addressed." The blood drained from David's face. "Performance issues? But I just got promoted." "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "that promotion is being rescinded, along with your employment." "You can't fire me!" David's voice cracked. "I'm your brother." "That's exactly why I can fire you." I met his eyes. "Because, unlike Mom and Dad, I actually know what you've been doing at Heritage. The inflated expense reports, the clients you've been billing for work your team did, the credit you've been taking for other people's projects." David's confident facade crumbled completely. Around us, his colleagues were shifting uncomfortably, suddenly understanding that their golden boy wasn't so golden after all. "Marcus, please," Mum stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "We're family. We can work this out." Family. The word that had been used to exclude me for so long was now being offered as a reason to include me. "No," I said simply. "We're not." The finality in my voice seemed to hit her like a physical blow. "We raised you," Dad said, his voice getting louder. "We gave you everything." "You gave David everything," I interrupted. "You gave me a college education that you missed the graduation for, and a family business that you made clear I wasn't welcome in. Everything else I built myself." Rachel appeared at my side, having slipped in during the commotion. She handed me a folder. "The paperwork for the heritage acquisition is complete," she said professionally. "All board positions have been confirmed for Monday's meeting." I nodded and turned back to my family. "David, you have until Friday to clear out your office. Your severance package is more than generous. 1 month's salary, which is more consideration than you showed the 3 employees you fired to cover your expense account discrepancies." "Marcus, honey," Mum tried again, reaching for my arm. "Please, let's just sit down and talk about this. We can fix this." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. For a moment, I saw the mother who used to read me bedtime stories, who kissed scraped knees, who told me I could be anything I wanted to be. But then I remembered the empty seats at my graduation, the lone request that was laughed at, the 5 years of phone calls where she asked when I was going to get serious about my life. "There's nothing to fix, Mom," I said gently, removing her hand. "This isn't broken. This is just over." I picked up my jacket from the chair and nodded to Harrison. "Shall we go discuss Monday's transition plan?" "Of course," Harrison replied. "The car is waiting outside." As we walked toward the exit, I could hear my family behind me, Dad's angry voice. "You can't just walk away from your family." Mum's tearful pleas. "Marcus, please, we love you." David's desperate calls. "This isn't over. You can't do this to me." But I didn't turn around. At the door, Harrison paused. "That was quite a performance," he said quietly. "Are you sure you're ready for what comes next? Running a company is very different from owning one." I looked back one last time at the people who'd raised me, who'd shaped me, who'd ultimately forced me to become strong enough to succeed without them. "I've been ready for 5 years," I said. "I just didn't know it yet." As we stepped into the night air, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "How do you feel?" I thought about the question as Harrison's driver opened the car door. How did I feel? Sad? Angry? Victorious? Relieved? The truth was, I felt free. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely, utterly free. The ride to Heritage Corporation's headquarters was silent except for the soft hum of the engine. Harrison sat across from me in the back of his company car, occasionally glancing at his phone, but mostly just watching the city lights blur past the windows. "You know," he finally said as we pulled into the underground garage, "in 30 years of business, I've never seen anything quite like what just happened back there." I loosened my tie slightly. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, replaced by a strange emptiness I hadn't expected. "What do you mean?" "Most people who acquire companies want to make a grand entrance. Press releases, board meetings, champagne toasts." He studied my face in the dim light of the garage. "You just nuked your entire family relationship to make a point." "It wasn't about making a point." The words came out more defensive than I'd intended. "It was about setting the record straight." Harrison nodded slowly as his driver opened the door. "Come on, let's go to my office. We have a lot to discuss." The Heritage Corporation building at night was a different beast entirely. During the day, it buzzed with the energy of hundreds of employees. Now it felt almost cathedral-like in its emptiness. Our footsteps echoed off the marble floors as we made our way to the executive elevator. "You know David's going to fight this," Harrison said as we rode up to the 42nd floor. "He's not the type to go quietly." "Let him fight." I was surprised by how calm I sounded. The employment contract he signed has a morality clause. The expense account fraud alone is grounds for immediate termination without severance. "You've been planning this for a while." It wasn't a question. Harrison had been CEO long enough to recognize calculated moves when he saw them. 18 months, I admitted, ever since I sold the startup. I started researching investment opportunities, and Heritage kept coming up in my analysis. Strong fundamentals, good market position, but there were consistent reports of middle management issues, inflated expenses, questionable billing practices, low morale in certain departments. I met his eyes. When I realized David worked here, I decided to dig deeper. The elevator opened directly into Harrison's office suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. He gestured for me to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "And what did you find?" David had been systematically taking credit for his team's work while billing clients for hours he never worked. 3 junior employees had filed complaints that were buried by his supervisor. 2 of them quit rather than continue working under him. Harrison poured 2 glasses of scotch from a crystal decanter on his desk. "I have to admit, we missed that completely. David always presented well in meetings. He learned from the best. I accepted the glass, but didn't drink. My father taught him that perception is more important than performance. That as long as you look successful and sound confident, people will believe you are successful." "And what did your father teach you?" I thought about that for a moment. "That I wasn't worth investing in." Harrison leaned back in his chair. Clearly, he was wrong about that. My phone had been buzzing constantly since we left the restaurant, text after text from family members, missed calls from numbers I recognized. I glanced at the latest message from my mother. "Please come home. We need to talk about this like a family." Family, there was that word again. "They want to reconcile," I said, holding up the phone. "Do you?" "I don't know." It was the most honest answer I could give. 5 years ago, I would have done anything for their approval. Tonight, I realized I don't need it anymore. That's a dangerous realization for a 30-year-old man to have. I looked up sharply. Dangerous? How? Because once you stop needing something, you stop caring about it. And a man who stops caring about family... Harrison paused, swirling his scotch. "Well, he has to be very careful not to become something he doesn't want to be." Before I could respond, his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a David Thompson here. He's quite insistent about seeing you both." I wasn't surprised. David had never been good at accepting defeat. "Send him up," Harrison said. He looked at me. "This is your company now, Marcus. How do you want to handle this?" "Let him say what he came to say, then escort him out." 5 minutes later, David burst through the office doors like a man possessed. His hair was dishevelled, his tie crooked, and there was a wild look in his eyes that I'd never seen before. "This is insane," he shouted, pointing at me. You can't just waltz in here and destroy my career because you're jealous. Jealous? I remained seated, keeping my voice level. Of what, exactly? Of everything. Of the fact that I worked my way up legitimately while you bought your way in with dirty money. Harrison cleared his throat. David, I'm going to stop you right there. First, Marcus's acquisition of heritage was completely above board. Second, your own employment here is under review for multiple violations of company policy. What violations? David's voice cracked slightly. I opened the folder Rachel had given me and spread several documents across Harrison's desk. Expense reports showing charges for client dinners that your assistant confirmed you ate alone. Billing records for overtime hours on weekends when building security shows you never entered the office. Performance reviews you submitted for team members claiming credit for projects you had no involvement in. David's face went pale as he looked at the papers. Where did you get these? I've been investigating you for 6 months, David, ever since I started buying heritage stock. I stood up, finally feeling the full weight of what I was doing. Did you really think you could commit fraud indefinitely without anyone noticing? I never committed fraud. Those are just administrative errors. $18,000 in fake dinner charges is not an administrative error. Harrison's voice was ice cold. Neither is billing clients for 40 hours of work you never performed. David turned to me with a look of pure desperation. Marcus, please, I'm your brother. You can't do this to family. Stop. The word came out harder than I'd intended. Stop using that word. You lost the right to call me family 5 years ago. What are you talking about? We've always been family. Have we? I moved closer to him. When Dad refused to loan me $5,000 for my startup, where were you? When they missed my graduation because of your maybe promotion, did you say anything? When they spent 5 years telling everyone I was a failure, did you ever once defend me? David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I'll tell you where you were, I continued. You were enjoying being the golden child. You were basking in the attention of being the only successful son. You never once stood up for me, because my failure made your success look even better. You never what? Never laughed when Dad called my business a fantasy. Never agreed when Mum said I needed to grow up and get a real job. Never told your colleagues that your brother was unemployed because you were embarrassed to be related to me. Each accusation hit him like a physical blow. His shoulders sagged as the fight went out of him. I didn't know you were successful, he said quietly. If you had known what? You would have treated me differently? You would have respected me? I shook my head. That's exactly the problem, David. Your respect was conditional on my success. My love for you never was. The past tense hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Was? David's voice was barely a whisper. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in years. This man who had shared a childhood with me, who had taught me to ride a bike, who had once been my hero before he became my rival. Yeah, I said softly. Was. David broke down then. Not the angry, frustrated breakdown of a man losing an argument, but the complete collapse of someone watching their entire world crumble. Please, he sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I didn't realize. Please don't take everything away from me. For a moment I felt something crack in my chest. This was my big brother, the person I'd looked up to for the first 20 years of my life. Seeing him broken like this should have brought me satisfaction, but instead it just made me feel tired. "I'm not taking anything away from you," I said gently. "I'm just stopping you from taking things that don't belong to you." Harrison stepped forward. "David, security will escort you out now. You have until Friday to clear your office, and HR will contact you about your final paycheck." "What am I supposed to tell Rebecca?" "The kids?" David looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "How do I explain to my wife that I lost my job because my brother bought the company?" "Tell her the truth," I replied. "Tell her you lost your job because you committed fraud. Tell her you lost your brother because you never treated him like one." Security arrived then. 2 professional, polite men who guided David toward the elevator. At the last moment, he turned back to me. "This isn't over, Marcus. Family doesn't just disappear." "You're right," I said as the elevator doors closed between us. "But we stopped being family a long time ago. Tonight, I just made it official." Harrison and I stood in silence for several minutes after David left. The weight of what had just happened settled over the office like a heavy blanket. "Well," Harrison finally said, "that was unpleasant." "Necessary," I corrected, "but unpleasant." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Rachel. "Saw the news already hit the financial blogs. Anonymous tech entrepreneur reveals identity in hostile family takeover. You're going to be famous by morning." I showed the message to Harrison, who winced. "Are you prepared for the media attention?" "Does it matter? The acquisition is legal, the firing is justified, and the family drama..." I shrugged. "Well, that was always going to come out eventually. Your parents are going to be devastated." The statement hit me unexpectedly hard. For all their faults, for all the ways they had failed me, they were still my parents. They had raised me, fed me, put me through college. They had loved me in their limited, conditional way. "Yeah," I said quietly, "they are. It's not too late, you know. You could call them, explain the situation, try to salvage something." I considered it for a moment. I could picture myself driving back to their house, sitting in the living room where I'd spent countless hours as a child. I could apologise for the dramatic reveal, explain my side of the story, maybe even find a way to forgive David's fraud. But then I thought about all the times I'd already tried to explain myself to them. All the times I'd asked for support and received criticism instead. All the years I'd spent trying to earn their respect while they gave it freely to David. "No," I said finally, "I don't think I could." Harrison nodded slowly. "Then you need to be prepared for the consequences. This kind of public family rift, it changes things. People will judge you for it. Let them. Your parents will never forgive you. I know. David will spend the rest of his life resenting you. I know that too." Harrison studied my face carefully. "And you're okay with all of that?" I walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably holding each other and crying. David was probably drinking himself into oblivion while his wife demanded answers he couldn't give. The Heritage Corporation employees who had attended the party were probably texting their colleagues about the insane family drama they'd just witnessed. But up here, 42 floors above all of that chaos, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 years. Peace. "You know what the worst part was?" I said, still looking out at the lights. It wasn't the missing graduation or the refused loan or even the constant criticism. It was the fact that they never saw me. What do you mean? They saw their version of me, the disappointment, the screw-up, the son who couldn't live up to expectations. I turned back to Harrison. But they never saw who I actually was. They never saw the person who was smart enough to build a multi-million-dollar company, disciplined enough to work 18-hour days, strategic enough to plan this acquisition for 18 months. And now they do? Now it doesn't matter if they do or not. I finished my scotch and set the glass down on Harrison's desk. I don't need them to see me anymore. I see myself. Harrison smiled for the first time all evening. That's either the most mature thing I've heard all night or the most ruthless. Why can't it be both? Good point. He stood up and extended his hand. Well, Mr. Thompson, welcome to Heritage Corporation. Your first board meeting is Monday at 9 a.m. I shook his hand, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. What's the agenda? Restructuring the middle management hierarchy, reviewing our client billing practices, and discussing your vision for the company's future. Harrison paused. Also, figuring out how to handle the media attention from tonight's events. The media attention doesn't concern me. What concerns me is making sure Heritage becomes the company it was meant to be. And what kind of company is that? I thought about all the employees David had undermined, all the clients who had been overcharged, all the potential that had been wasted by putting politics before performance. The kind of company that rewards merit over connections, where hard work matters more than family name, where people are judged by what they accomplish, not who their parents are. Harrison's smile widened. You know, I think I'm going to enjoy working for you. As I rode the elevator down to the garage, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to pick up, to hear her voice, to try one more time to bridge the gap between us. But a larger part of me knew that bridge had been burned long before tonight. Tonight, I had simply stopped pretending it still existed. I let the call go to voicemail. Outside, Harrison's driver was waiting to take me home. As we pulled out of the garage and into the late-night traffic, I allowed myself to think about what came next. Running Heritage Corporation would be challenging, but I had good people around me. The media attention would be intense. But I had weathered worse storms. The hardest part would be learning to live without a family. But as I watched the city lights stream past the car window, I realized something that surprised me. I was looking forward to finding out who Marcus Thompson could become when he stopped trying to be someone else's son. My phone buzzed one last time, a text from Rachel. How are you holding up? I typed back, free. And for the first time in my adult life, I meant it completely. The car turned onto my street, carrying me toward a future that was entirely my own. Behind me, the Heritage Corporation building grew smaller in the distance, but the weight of ownership, of responsibility, of possibility remained. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Monday would bring board meetings and difficult decisions. But tonight, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Finally, completely, uncompromisingly myself. No apologies, no explanations, no looking back, just Marcus Thompson, owner of Heritage Corporation, driving home through a city that suddenly felt full of infinite possibility.